they can see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, Brian, we good to go?
All set.
Okay, wonderful. Welcome, everyone. One small note, we have 3 AWS credits, $25 each at the end. So if you stay, you're one of those lucky person. My name is Amit. I work as developer advocate, been with AWS little over 5 years, work out of New York. So I work mostly with the financial services customers, and recently moved into a DevRel role. Pretty much come from development, software architecture, cloud based migrations and modernization. So today I do have a good amount of agenda, and this is a small crowd, so I would rather want to have it more interactive. I do this primer. I'm assuming that most of the folks here are at least familiar with AWS. So I'll probably skim through this very quickly and get into the meat of the topic, which is tools for .NET developers that we have. And then how do you go about migrating, modernizing a .NET app from on-prem to cloud, and from, like, let's say you have a VM-based architecture moving into a higher abstraction tier. So that's a good amount of topics, but I like to have interactions. So interrupt and let's have a more interactive session. Okay. Okay, so before tech, it's the business goal. So that's the clarity, and I'm gonna skim through the initial set of things. You have to have a right business driver in terms of why you are going and why you are modernizing. Sometimes it's agility, digital transformation, cost, depending on the type of application. It's a crown jewel application, maybe it's having a lot of performance issues, so you want to modernize for the cloud. Based on your business need, you would have the business drivers, right? I'm quickly skimming through the AWS. I like to see the math in terms of what's the relationship between regions, availability zones, data centers. And the key part that many times people miss is the availability zones. It consists of one or more discrete data centers, each with redundant power, networking, connectivity, housed in a separate facilities. So they're basically miles apart. They're not next building, they're miles apart. So you could have a pretty good multi-AZ design for applications. Sometimes that design can help you with the DR scenarios also. Yes, you will all become masters of all the services. Starts with shared responsibility model, off and in. AWS takes care of essentially hypervisor down to the actual data center, power cooling on us, but what you bring into the cloud is yours, but we provide you services and tools that help you. Like if you bring in data, encryption, decryption, we give you tools. Authentication, authorization, we give you services. So that's kind of a shared responsibility model with which we go. And there is a ton of services that we have. We will touch upon ML today, a couple of demos I have. But the idea is modernization is not just going from VM to containers to serverless, it's also leveraging the higher level services that you have. On top of it, we have a huge partner network, which built on top of AWS, and then marketplace solutions offering. Okay, that was very quick. That's the fastest I've ever gone on the basics, but I'll pause. Anyone who's absolutely not familiar with AWS and has any questions on the AWS cloud as a basics? If not, we'll get going.
You do the backup as well?
Yes, we do the backup as well. So we have, if you take services, there's a foundational level services, where is compute, storage, databases, networking. This is like foundational level services. And in storage, we have backup based, we have RDBMS based, NoSQL based, graph based, time series based. So depending on the type of data and access pattern, we have different service offerings.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so .NET on AWS is this, you will say, Amit, when did you start supporting? When did AWS start supporting .NET on AWS? So as you can see, this is a pretty neat eye chart. It shows you a kind of a timeline. Early 2008, that's when we started supporting .NET on AWS. Windows, if you can see, we started with Windows 2003 and moved on to support 2008 and other editions of Windows. SQL Server. So if you see a .NET shop, what I would call it is, it'll have Windows, it'll have SQL, it'll have Active Directory, it'll have .NET-based applications, right? So we started supporting Windows, SQL, moved to support .NET, Active Directory integration. And then once you have an application running, you actually want to take care of tracing, monitoring, authentication and authorization. encryption, decryption. So we have periphery services to support those. Giving you example, .NET-based tracing, we have a service called X-Ray. If you use that, it actually enables correlation, and you can see call stack across different tiers, like troubleshooting some of those peculiar use cases where the amount of time is being spent, X-Ray comes very handy. And last but not the least, .NET itself has gone through a journey. So just to give an intro, I mean, started with 2000, early 2000, 1.0, 1.1, 2.0, 3, 4, 4.8. That's the framework .NET, how it evolved. And then it moved to .NET Core, which is multi-platform. And last November, Microsoft consolidated with one, which is .NET 5. And I'm happy to say that .NET 5 is .NET 5 ready. AWS is .NET 5 ready, and it has been ready right when the .NET 5 was launched. So this is continuous work of last 12 plus years, and we're not done. I will be showing you some of the capabilities that we are adding, and also newer tools that we are building to support .NET-based application modernization. Okay, any questions here, or I'll just proceed. If you have questions, feel free to put them in chat, and hopefully we can take them.
Well, I'm not going to. I was going to speak instead of typing, but at some point, because I'll say I mean, I did Windows programming back in the day, but nothing recently. At some point along the way, if you can sort of say why someone would pick .NET versus another approach.
Sure, definitely. Here's the thing, right? I mean, enterprises typically the two stack that is most common is either a Java-based stack or a .NET-based stack. I think early 2000s when the adoption happened, it was basically for the RAD, rapid application development. Initially, website development on a server-side development was very closely like where HTML and server-side code was mixed and merged. With .NET came that separation in terms of code behind and a design layer. From there, a lot of websites evolved in ASP.NET Web Forms, ASP.NET WCF services. Pretty much the capability that you can take the mono version of .NET or .NET Core, run it on Windows or run it on Linux, and take the Xamarin Edition and run it on mobile applications. That gave basically write once and being able to deploy across different platform. With .NET 5, that's the goal also, to merge all these different runtime versions and make it a one version of .NET. I would say rapid application development, C# as in language, has gotten good amount of popularity over the years. Last I know, there are 16 million .NET developers, which includes C#, VB, and other .NET languages. Other than that, it also integrates very well with the data tiers, caching tiers, other services, and especially in the Microsoft stack. But with REST and other services, it's pretty neat integration. And I'll show you .NET SDK for AWS, which integrates with all the AWS services. Did that answer you, Brian?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Cool. Was there another question? Okay, cool. Let's go in. What are the tools for .NET, right? If you see here, typically a .NET developer works inside Visual Studio. So first question I get from .NET developer is like, do you have any support inside Visual Studio? Second question I get is like, how do I manipulate AWS services inside .NET? Like, what do I have to do with it? And then what else? Like, I work with Azure DevOps, I work with Jenkins or Atlassian Bitbucket for CI/CD. Like, how do I integrate .NET-based application into my DevSecOps pipeline? So those are the typical set of questions. And what I'll do is, instead of talking in PowerPoint, let me just jump into Visual Studio and show you some of the capabilities. Okay, here you go. So this is my Visual Studio 2019. And what I have done here is I have installed AWS Toolkit for Visual Studio. So I go to extensions, put in AWS, and here is the AWS Toolkit for Visual Studio. I've installed it. Once it is installed, the first thing that you would notice is the AWS Explorer. Basically, think of it like all the resources that you have in your AWS account, you're able to see them right inside Visual Studio. Like if I go to, let's say, here is my management console, right? And I go to my S3 bucket. Let's go in. Okay, so these are the buckets that you see here. The same set of bucket are here. Right? You may ask like, hey, how is it actually able to see that? It has this concept of account profile. So you specify the account profile detail. Like tomorrow, let's say I'm working on another account, I can get the access key, secret access key, and map that to that account. And then I will have multiple profiles. So based on the profile selected, that's the profile and the region. It'll show you the resources for that particular region, right? So if I see these are my AWS instances, and it's not just what you call, let me just make it tabbed. Okay, it's not just seeing, it's also manipulating. Like I can connect to that resource, I can do operations, I can create buckets right from Visual Studio. So the goal here is, as a .NET developer, I am comfortable working inside Visual Studio. So the lesser I have to go to my console for any other operations, that's the idea we have driven behind AWS Explorer. So you're able to see your resources, you're able to manipulate your resources, and do all the operations right inside Visual Studio. Again, connectivity is via the account profile. Once you specify, you can connect to your, like as a developer, I can work on multiple projects. So you can create those account profiles, and from there onwards, you're able to manipulate it right here. The second thing that you get as part of your toolkit is right-click deploy. So I know, I mean, right-click deploy, let me quickly just show you. This is a typical ASP.NET application. And hopefully the demo gods are happy right now. Yeah. Okay, so this is a typical ASP.NET application. What I did was I used the D3 engine in JavaScript base, so I can filter down. So that's a typical website. And I can literally right-click and deploy it to AWS from Visual Studio. And for the case of this demo, I actually have already done the deployment. So here you go. That's my Elastic Beanstalk edition. That's already installed. And if I see the Beanstalk running, here you go. That's my endpoint. This is the environment. The beauty of Beanstalk is basically, I mean, it gives you that auto provisioning, scaling, alarms, all the goodness that comes, which you have to take effort, like setting up monitoring dashboards and all that comes along with it. So right from Visual Studio, but you may say, hey, Amit, who will actually do the right-click deploy? Because obviously most of the enterprises will have some or the other way of DevOps pipeline. And the same command that that is exposed via right-click is also available via command line. So we have .NET extensions using which the same publish can be invoked. So basically that commandlet can be used in your CI/CD pipeline, and that can take care of deployment. Okay, so we saw Explorer, we saw right-click deploy, and depending on the type of application, you get different kinds of deployment. So here is a serverless Lambda-based application. So I will get published to Lambda. So publish to Beanstalk, publish to Lambda, publish to container. So all three options are available. And third is like, I mean, do you guys provide some boilerplate code to start? And you bet we do. So you do new project, and the languages, once you have the toolkit installed, you'll see AWS, and let's say I'll start with the Lambda project, right? And I'll choose the default. First of all, I come up with the blueprints. If you see, these are the blueprints. Essentially, it will give me a boilerplate code auto-generated. And second, you notice .NET 5 container images. So with Lambda also has a change. Now you can actually have container image with Lambda. And we have support for .NET 5. So you can actually create your own container image with your application. And we have ability to run them via Lambda. Yes, the first call actually will have a hit, and that's expected. You can do pre-warming and that kind of thing. So in this case, let me quickly go and generate something. So I think people are familiar with detect label. So putting a file on image on a S3 bucket, a Lambda function being called, which does recognition. So I am quickly generating boilerplate code for all that. Basically, you take it and you customize it for your need. And subject it to my demo gods being happy. Great. So right now it's working fine. So here you go. I can quickly show you the, here you go. So this is the boilerplate code that it generated, right? And here is the recognition detect label async, right? So it can, so it'll give you a boilerplate code generated. So you can choose any template from here. You can look at the Explorer, see all the resources, and you can do right-click deploy based operations for your Beanstalk, container, or Lambda functions. Okay, so
whoa, I'm just getting a little freaked out at how powerful this is. Can you go back to the top of that Lambda function? I just want to.
Sure. You want to see, I was going to go through the SDK quickly so that people understand what actually is the SDK being used here in few minutes. Is this what you? Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you where you're going with that. So
wow. I'm. Oh, carry on. Okay.
Okay, cool. So I hope people got the gist of how powerful that toolkit is. Basically, starting sample code. SDK, I will quickly show you how you work with the SDK, and then deployment, right-click based, and the same thing can be abstracted via command line based also. And you'll say, Amit, Visual Studio is great, but do you have support for code or JetBrains Writer? You bet we do. So Visual Studio Code, we have a toolkit for the same. And basically, the things that you saw here, the list of resources inside the AWS Explorer, we have the capability inside Visual Studio Code, and it has more a support for the serverless based application. So the capability wise, Visual Studio on Windows has a little bit more capabilities compared to the Visual Studio Code, but it has the same set of bells and whistles. Here you go. I have the toolkit installed for Visual Studio Code. Explorer, I can see the resources. And for serverless applications, I have ability to do end-to-end deployment publish also. Similarly, we support JetBrains Writer too. We have a toolkit. Just the clear demarcation, Visual Studio Code and Writer are primarily supporting the serverless-based applications, so Lambda-based development, debugging, and deployment. Okay, so that's on this. Now we move on to the SDK. So let's go and let's learn to how you use SDK. I will use a very simple function. Since we saw S3 buckets, so first thing I want to do is connect to my account and iterate through my list of S3 bucket. So here you go. The first thing in your project, what you do is you go and take the reference to the NuGet package. We have a very consistent naming pattern. So AWS SDK dot, once you do, you pretty much get all the AWS services that you're working with. Okay. So you take the, let's say in this case, I wanted to work with S3, right? So here you go, S3. You take that dependency. In this case, I have already done the homework. So here is my S3 and go in and you refer. So there is a classic pattern in AWS. Basically, if you see the naming pattern using Amazon.service-name, Amazon.service-name.model. So S3 model, EC2 model, DynamoDB model. So once you have that, pretty much for all the services, you know exactly like that is the pattern. So once you refer that, then you have ability to create the client for that. And again, the naming pattern is Amazon service name client. Once you create the client, and you know what, let me just do a quick debugging so that you know what exactly is happening. Okay, let's go in. Check fields. So basically I'm checking the profile name. Let's go in and what's the profile do I have here? So if I go to the config, I have profile as Meetup Foundation. So here you go, Meetup Foundation is the profile. By the way, if the same code has to run on EC2 machine, you don't have to have profile because the role that is associated with EC2, that's the role we'll be running under. So you don't have to do any profile kind of thing. Here, because it's running outside, I had to do it. So I create the client. And what would you expect from a S3 client? You would expect it's a scalable object storage. So it has to have copy, move, delete. those kind of functions, right? So you have that. And you see there's a pattern on each one. So you have delete and async. Delete async. So you can call it synchronous, call wait till not it's finished, or you can call sync await so that the callback will, whenever it finishes, it will do the callback. So you have both synchronous as well as asynchronous based API available to you. In this case, I'm going to go in and I'm going to iterate through I will call one function, which is list buckets. It gives me a response of all the buckets that I have, right? And then you have a typed object, S3 bucket. So all the properties are available, right? Bucket name, so and so. In this case, I'm just iterating through it and saying, hey, this is the list of bucket that you have, right? And here is the output of it. Very simple. What I did is took the dependency to the NuGet package. We have SDK NuGet for both SDK, the .NET framework as well as for .NET Core, right? So you can see there is, depending on type of service you are manipulating, you will refer the same. And once you have referred, you import. The pattern is exactly service name dot model. So Amazon S3 model. And then each one has a client. You create the client and you start. So the learning is basically what all functions and methods are exposed inside that client library. And for that, we have an API documentation that gives you information around, okay, what are the methods to do different operations on a particular service. Okay. Any questions on SDK? Okay, I'm taking that as no and proceed further. We have we have a CDK for .NET. So folks who are familiar with infrastructure as code, CloudFormation, or Terraform templates, or ARM templates. I am a developer. I actually do not like templating. What I like is writing code in C# or Java, which can generate the templates for me. And that's exactly what CDK library is. So you can write C# code or Java code, or we have support for other languages, TypeScript, Python, and it will generate the CloudFormation templates for you. So that's the CDK for .NET. These are typical standard AWS support. We have support for PowerShell, CLI, .NET CLI extensions. Once you have the CLI extensions, you're getting the same set of functionality that you get inside Visual Studio, like the one which I mentioned. Publish or create is available via the CLI extensions on command line. Serverless application model on the this is a type of Lambda based application. So you could actually do websites, ASP.NET MVC websites being served via Lambda, right? So that's also supported, and is basically integrating with our CI/CD, either with our code suite services like code commit, code build, code pipeline, code deploy, or you can pick and choose. So code pipeline gives you ability that, hey, maybe your source code is in GitHub, maybe you want to do build in Jenkins, maybe you want to do test in BlazeMeter, maybe you want to deploy in. So code pipeline has the ability to integrate with a different set of CI/CD partners. Okay. These are the same set of things that I showed you as a screenshot: publishing, looking at the resources, and deployment. We have the code and the JetBrains slider. We saw the SDK. The one key thing I would tell you, like you would say, hey, I know Amazon AWS has APIs for all these services, and I just use an SDK. How do I know which API uses XML, JSON? What's the authentication authorization? Did you notice you didn't have to worry about those? All those are abstracted from you, like how the serialization happens, marshalling happens, what's the payload, that's all abstracted from you. All you do is you work on a typed object, which is much easier than understanding the integrities of a service. Some services which were older had some other kind of input and output. Newer services have others, so you just don't have to know. And that's the beauty of SDK for .NET, where you're pretty much just working on the top level libraries. This is the pattern. As I showed you, service name.model. You create the client, and then you pretty much call the operation sync or async. In this case, it's showing you the async pattern, right? This is the same example: S3 client, list object async, and iterating through the buckets. The CLI extension that I have been talking, this is once you have had installed, this is the installation, and this is basically .NET Lambda deploy function. So you could get the deployment creation right from command line also. You do not have to be tied to just Visual Studio. Okay, now I'll move on to another section, which is more around applications modernization, and then talk about .NET applications path, legacy .NET framework based application, as well as the newer .NET Core or .NET 5 based application. Before I do that, any questions on the tools that we have discussed or seen? Okay, I guess not. Okay, let's move ahead. Let me know if I'm going quicker. I can slow down, and because I have good amount of content, so that's one of the reason why I'm running a little faster. Okay, so the next is application modernization. Basically, the first thing people understand modernization essentially is, hey, I have a VM-based architecture, and I want to go either to containers or maybe I want to go towards serverless. That's, yes, it's type of modernization. The second is leveraging modern managed cloud services where applicable. Sometimes it's basically on-prem, you're using, let's say, some kind of queuing. Maybe you want to use the managed version of that same, right? Maybe you have a database engine. Maybe you want to use the managed database engine. So that's one path. The other is in the application, existing application, maybe the time when it was built, it didn't have, or it didn't think of those use cases that is possible now with the cloud services. Could be leveraging AI ML or other ways, like can the API be called by a Alexa skill and exposed inside a car that can interact with the same application, right? So those are different kinds of modernization. But typically for a conversation, when we go to the customers and say application portfolio analysis, it starts with like, how do you want to bring that application to the cloud? You probably have heard the 7 Rs: refactor, rehost, replatform, repurchase. The conversation starts with applications attributes. Some applications are crown jewel applications, and customers want to actually have more investment into it. So in that case, they look to refactor, get to more cloud native based design. Sometimes it's driven by timeline, like, hey, my data center lease is out and I have to get moving everything by so-and-so date. In that case, mostly what we start with is pretty much take snapshots and recreate them. So VM export import, cloud endure based block by block replication. So that's EC2, right? And the second is basically containerizing. The same application, both path, Windows containerization as well as Linux containers. And depending on the application complexity, I will go through the path how you actually can take your legacy application and go towards containerization. Most of the net new development, I am seeing more towards the serverless offering. And now that Lambda supports container images also, this is getting a good amount of interest from the enterprise customers. So typically application journey, on-prem to clouds. This is, just think of it like your on-prem. You have a 3-tier based application, web tier, API tier, data tier. This is, right? So just on-prem, let's replicate the same application on, let's say, AWS. Here is the, so I'll go back and show you. This is the web tier, API tier, and data tier. I came to AWS, pretty much got instances, and I have auto scaling policy configured. I did one change. Instead of a database engine on EC2, I'm using RDS instance. Okay, for monitoring, I enabled CloudWatch and integrated with Active Directory. Right, I can say I want to modernize it further, because you'll see a pattern that the more modernization happens, the lesser EC2 instances remain. So this is one example of how you would modernize your middle tier. Maybe there's an API gateway, again, serverless. Maybe the actual implementation of the function is in Lambda, again, serverless. And then maybe you decouple those calls using queuing and pub/sub. So SQS is our queuing service, and pub/sub. So think of it like the request came to Lambda, Lambda put that into queue. Another Lambda picked it from the queue, did the processing, posted the notification via SNS, and the user got response that, hey, your operation is successful. Now, I don't have any EC2 instances here. I removed the website to be a bucket because S3 supports enabling. If you have a HTML, JavaScript-based website, why not? It can easily serve, and you don't have to manage an EC2 instance with VMs. Anytime there is a VM, upgrade, patching, all that is on you. If there is no VM, those things go away. Now come to .NET. You have two types of application. .NET framework-based applications. What are those? ASP.NET Web Forms, WinForms, WPF, old ASMX-based services, WCF services. Those are all like .NET framework-based application. And the second is .NET Core-based application, which is multi-platform. As you can see, .NET Core can run in all these compute services, whereas .NET Framework is applicable to EC2, Beanstalk, Lightsail, container service. This is our orchestration, Kubernetes EKS, again, Kubernetes orchestration. And then serverless containers, which is Fargate, is .NET Core only, and Lambda, .NET Core only. So this is one path for framework-based application, and .NET Core-based can go pretty much across. Typically, a .NET, let me just quickly show you something. I should have changed the path for this. Yeah, so that's the one I want to show. So you start with .NET application. Are you looking to modernize? That's the first question. And again, don't think of this as a prescriptive kind of thing, but this is typical path. You want to looking for modernize. No, just move it to cloud. Okay, want to have control of the VM underlying. Yes, EC2. If you want to not know the underpinnings of EC2, auto scaling, monitoring, so the best way to start is Beanstalk. That's just gets you going in minutes, right? If not, EC2 is the path. Coming to the modernization path, is source code available? I know this question may sometimes people think, and I actually come across with this still, that hey, we do not have the, we don't know where the source code is, we just have the binary bits. If you don't have the source code, in that case, you're looking to just containerize it with the Windows container. Again, Windows container and Linux container, the maturity of Linux container is way more than Windows containers. And .NET framework-based applications pretty much have one path for containerization, which is Windows containers. If it can be optimized or modernized, which is basically, can you take that framework-based application and modernize it to .NET Core-based application? And that's where the many paths open up, be it serverless functions or be it the Fargate-based containers. Right, so those are different paths that open up. Now, Amit, this is very difficult. How do I actually know to use which tool? And that's where the tools that we have comes to the rescue. We have a guided assessment and toolkit. So basically, doing the analysis of the, we have a tool called Porting Assistant. So using the Porting Assistant, you can easily see the dependencies in an application. So first of all, it shows you the dependency graph. It also shows you, actually, I should have it running, Porting Assistant. Yeah, here we go. I recently did analysis of an application. Here you go. And it had good amount of NuGet packages which are incompatible. So it gives you a list of incompatible. It also gives you ability to see which source files actually are calling those. So one path is to actually analyze the application using Porting Assistant, right? And understanding the, this gives you kind of a sense of a level of effort required to modernize that application to .NET Core, right? So that's one path. The second path is containerization. Amit, I don't want to learn ECS, services, tasks, Docker file, and that's a little bit of learning curve. We actually have a tool called app to container. And using app to container, you can auto containerize your existing application. Think of it like you run that tool on an IIS machine. It will go crawl your IIS, go through all the websites, virtual directory, figure out the list of applications, websites running there, and come back with you a package that says, hey, I can do an auto containerization of this, give you the generated, and if you want, it'll do the deployment. So it notes the connection string to the databases so that you can change it. So this is for, again, starting for containerization, but if you do not want to go through the underpinnings of Docker file creation, understanding what should go into a ECS service or task. So app to container helps you for that. And it can do for .NET framework-based application. It can do it for Java on Linux also, right? So that's another.
Can I ask a question? Yes. What's the output of that A to C? Because I could see that doing a good starting point, but that I might want to do more afterwards. So I mean, what is and I'm always a little nervous about generated code that I can't do anything with it. So what kind of
Cloud
output
formation.
Say again?
Cloud formation templates.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And it can also do the work for you, run those and give you the status of it.
But okay, so that'd be cloud formation for the deployment. But what about for the? I mean, does it generate the underlying Docker files?
Yes, so you have access to both. You have first access to once it crawls through your IIS machine, it gives you the list of website it has found, and you can see that list. That's one output. The second output is when it goes through and generates the Docker file as well as the CloudFormation templates. That's another output. The third is deploying it and then getting the status of what happened to the deployment with the outputs of the CloudFormation templates. I mean, there are resources, so it has outputs, so the endpoints and all that. That's another output.
Okay.
Yeah. So the two service I just quickly went through is Porting Assistant. From analysis perspective, like analyze your legacy application to see what it would take to modernize them to .NET Core. App to Container is auto containerization for .NET as well as Java-based application to Linux. And the third, which is another program that we have, like there are customers with applications, like think of it like very, very old legacy VB6 application or ActiveX based application or old applications, and they just don't have any idea of what it does and what calls it makes. So we have a tool, EMP, that can actually think of like old regmon, filemon, which can find out all the registry calls, all the file IO calls. Similarly, that crawls when the application is running, it actually captures what it is doing and creates a package. It's also called container, but it's nothing to do with the Docker container. It has its own concept of application container. And you can take that application container, deploy it to another upgraded OS. So think of it like an application running on Windows 2003 or earlier versions. You can easily take that application, run it on 12, 16. And it has the ability to do a call from the application shim to the operating system. So that's another model for very old applications, which are very hard to modernize. Sometimes we don't have any code. That's one path for pretty old applications. For .NET Framework based application, if you can modernize, great. That's a perfect path. And I'll share with you like my experience of working with the customers. Web applications, API based services, like thread-based APIs, like which is all it does is like create, read, write, update, delete on a database kind of thing. Those are very easy to port to .NET Core. Old ASP.NET Web Forms-based applications are harder because it had a lot of glitchy code and framework-based libraries. Thick client-based applications, obviously for its own reasons. You can take the logic part of it and make them microservices, but the thick client, either you can do an app stream based streaming, or you modernize those thick client to maybe HTML5, Blazor, or Amplify based applications, right? So those are the typical path. App to container, I showed you two of them. We have two others. Drift is another service right now in preview. Basically, you can share a .NET assembly. It will identify the list of types inside that assembly, and then it gives you ability to modernize them. So there's a industry pattern going on that move from a legacy monolithic to the more modern microservices. So this actually embraces that pattern. You just have to identify what you want to expose as a microservices, and it will take care of auto creating those applications for you, the microservices. So it's right now in preview. So think of it like old applications which had all its logic embedded inside, sometimes in the UI layer, or we had a package layer for the service, but then they should be separate services because in memory, you can't scale much. There is dependencies. You want to have separate services with microservices, saying that each microservices should be in itself its own API endpoint, so that each microservices, when they're talking over network, right? So instead of in-memory based references, you're moving towards more network-based calls. So this helps you to actually take that journey of breaking your existing legacy monolith to a more microservices architecture pattern. And this Optimus is basically, think of it like code pipeline merges the whole CI/CD pipeline. Optimus is merging that whole modernization. So assessment to the path you take to modernize, and it'll weave together, do the assessment, and then link it with the modernization path. So this becomes kind of your dashboard for application modernization. Okay, this is one path we quickly looked at. Framework-based, you want to go towards core because multi-platform.
Amit,
Microsoft itself.
Can I ask you
Yes.
a question?
Yes.
Going back to the previous slide, very interesting, very powerful. You know, I guess I know the answer because Amazon can't disclose new stuff, but these tools are for .NET, but these would be interesting tools for, you know, not .NET as well.
So app2container is not .NET also, as I mentioned, it also supports Java.
Okay, wow, I missed that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So the idea, what you're saying, actually that is the idea. I mean, maybe .NET is the first candidate, but think of Optimus as a one platform where type of stack would have a type of modernization tools and would have ability to modernize. Right now, I'm sharing .NET, but you may see more in this. Java is already supported via app2container. So maybe in future, Drift may take a Java instead of IL, it's the VM, right? Bytecodes. So look at the bytecode and come back with the types from the bytecode and let the customer choose the type that they want to make it as a microservice. The same thing can be done, right?
Okay.
So that's the idea. I mean, right now it's .NET.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay. Cool. So yes, I mean, I don't have to beat this to death that you have to go towards more microservices. Again, I should say that, I mean, monolithic also has a place still. There definitely there's a valid place. With cloud, scalability wise, it's a great idea to actually split it into microservices so that each one can scale on its own, right? And also in legacy, everything was dumped into one data store. I mean, I have dumped binary files inside SQL Server, so I can attest to that. But now with microservices, each microservices will own a business domain. So what it is operating under, based on that, it can choose the actual data store. So if I'm manipulating time stream based data, I don't need to put that into RDBMS and do a very complex correlated subquery. Instead of that, I can actually use time stream database offering. If I'm manipulating graph, I may use NoSQL, Neptune. Sorry, a Neptune-based graph database. So the idea is to move towards more smaller APIs, which are exposed over public, again, 443, and it has its own data store. They can run on their own. They have their own CI/CD pipeline. And that's what we are trying to help with, porting assistant, which can show you dependency graph, incompatible libraries to understand like, hey, what that effort is. App2container, which can crawl through your IIS websites and give you ability to auto-containerize them, right? Here in nutshell, I'm summarizing. Identifies all the ASP.NET on IIS, identifies dependencies, including database connection string, creates the underlying container image that would be needed, pushes it to the ECR, creates the ECS task definitions or Kubernetes deployment, depending on what you choose. So ECS has service task, Kubernetes has pods and the details, and then creates the CI/CD pipeline so basically CloudFormation templates, right? Also works with Java apps on Linux.
So quick question about that.
Yes.
So let's say I've got an existing server and I point my app to container at that and I get a resulting image.
Yes.
That image I can then go and deploy out into an environment. I can use it. And in theory, it's an exact mirror of what I already had. But the next time I make a change to the application, what's the expected path for me to take? Because I don't have a Docker file that I can go and update and rebuild. Do I redeploy to an original machine and re-app to container, or is this sort of a one-time off migration?
So you can decouple the image and the actual application and have a CI/CD pipeline for the application part, right? If the application itself is changing, in that case, the the image and the application should be built. Again, I would think if there is changes going on, right? Think of it like, and how frequent are we talking? Like, is it daily kind of thing that you're going to change?
Well, let's consider it an application that's currently under development. So maybe there's a sprint every 2 weeks.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yes, and I mean, in a typical pattern, what I see customers doing is you have an application image being created whenever there is a change for the application, the actual underlying what you call container image, and then gets deployed. In this case, I will have to come back, like exactly you might have to rerun and create that package again. That's my understanding.
Okay, but I'm not misunderstanding it. The app to container isn't going to produce me a Docker file with a file system to build off of. It's going to produce me an actual image.
Yes, it generates an actual image. Yeah, but I'll take a note, like, are there any customization and expose that we have? This is a pretty fairly new, so I'll have to take that and come back to you on that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, but great question. Thank you. Okay, so modernization is one where you move from VM to container to serverless. Modernization could also mean like, hey, are there other things that I can use in my application? Like typical example for a web-based application, .NET has some kind of state, be it cache, be it session, be it some other state. Can you move that into Redis, right? I mean, you could use that, and we have configuration support. Like you just change the provider, and voila, it moves to the Redis type of modernization, right? Enabling, this is again, this ordering has changed. Okay, so that's one example of another modernization. The next set of modernization, I would say, is in the world of leveraging other services. Like I'm just giving you one stack, which I'll show you a demo of it. You have with every cloud provider, you have several AI ML-based services. If you see here, there are 3 areas. At the bottom is the ML framework and infrastructure. So this is primarily for the gurus, ML gurus who wants to actually have complete control on the underlying infrastructure. The second, which is the ML services, which the ML scientists who are working to train a model continuously with different set of data. That's another model. The third is the auto-train model, right? And that's where the .NET developer comes in. Many .NET developers do not have the wherewithal to actually create a model, train it against different set of data. So they look to actually leverage these AI services in their application, right? And let me quickly show you one quick demo on this. Here you go. Okay, so there is a service called Comprehend. It does sentiment analysis. So I'm gonna quickly delete this file. Okay. Okay, so this is, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay, cool, wonderful. For a moment, I thought there was a blip. Okay, so this is a simple text, which is basically saying, hey, I just want to find some really cool new places I have never visited, and typical review, and it does have some kind of sentiment like, hey, you are just terrible and something, right? So what I'll do is, the standard drill for SDK is taking the dependency. So I took the dependency for Comprehend, here you go. And I have the comprehend model as an import, and I read that text file and then call the comprehend APIs. So comprehend gives me ability to do sentiment analysis. Essentially, I can find out language, I can find out entities being referred, I can find out key phrases being referred from that text. So let's quickly run through the same. Okay, and hopefully the demo gods are happy here also. Okay, so reads comprehend client, and you see I use the endpoint east. I mean, all the AI-based services have endpoint across different regions. So I call the detect domain language, I call detect entities, and if you want to see what actually is happening internally, here is go. So every call has some input, and then it calls the output. I take the output and creating a string that I dump it onto the actual file. Okay, let's go ahead and run this. And it should have generated a file called comprehend. Here you go. And it has language, EN. It did find entities of 2021 date, and it gives you a score. Key phrases that it found, some really cool new places. And remember, there was a word called terrible. I think that played a role in getting a sentiment to negative. Right? Why am I showing this? It's just that existing applications, the adding newer AI-based use cases was hard at that time because you had to build those services. Now in the cloud, you have those services available. Another example, a customer brought in their legacy application and they added a chatbot to their application. It's so easy with Lex, and any application will have a top list of questions to ask. So they expose those via the chatbot. Another example is they have an API layer. That API layer is exposed via Alexa skill. So those are newer ways to modernize and enhance the existing application. And typically, if you see the path, the same thing, based on the type of AI library, Amazon, name, service, client, give the input, and it does the translation. I mean, in the interest of time, I do have demo for others like recognition. You will use recognition-based call to detect either faces or attributes in an image. Transcribe for transcribing, and like if you have a video, it will go through and transcribe the actual text being said. Translate, take the text and translate into different set of locales. But the drill is exactly the same. You have translate model, give the input, call the APIs, and get. It's pretty straightforward with the .NET SDK, right? So adding those newer use cases becomes much easier as part of your modernizing your application.
Is there a place where someone could go to find sample code for these things?
Yeah. So all this sample code, what I'm sharing, actually, I have put that in my Twitter also. So if you go, and I can share this all everything. So here you go. As you're starting, you start with your home page, and I will share all three of these. So if you see, we have a .NET on AWS homepage, which starts with step-by-step guides, code samples. And then we have a YouTube library with hundreds of videos for each service and with sample code. And the third is basically, if you want to immerse yourself, we have a lab starting from configuring toolkit to how do you work with the service. And the one that I showed you, AIML, the same thing exactly that I showed you, exact same thing with the code is available in this workshop.
Outstanding, thank you.
Okay, and I'll share all this resources with you guys. Okay, so that's another modernization. Now the last bucket. Before I go into last bucket, any questions on that? Pretty much, it's like another flavor of SDK implementation, right? There's not much difference there. Okay, cool. So the last topic I wanted to touch upon is, great, I got started. Great, I see sample set of applications I can deploy, and once it is deployed, what do you help me with? Troubleshooting, right? And that's also important. And that's where our integration with X-Ray comes in. So X-Ray, once you enable in your .NET application, so basically there is 2 lines of code that you add. There is an agentless version also, but once you add that, think of it like it generates a correlation ID. And now you can track that whole request with that correlation ID. So if you have an application which has web tier, API tier, external services, data tier, once a correlation ID is generated, you can think of it like the call came in, it spent this much time in the web tier, this much time in the API tier, this much in the external services, and this much in data tier. Immediately you know where the bottleneck is, right? And it generates a service map of that call flow. Very useful for troubleshooting performance-based use cases. Okay, so that's the representation on the AWS console, how you see it, right? Pretty much you can go to the detail level. Per service, all services, you have ability to track. Another example of the same thing is application insights, because any application is not one service. It's a set of services put together as a solution. So that you could do a dashboarding and create using the app insights. Again, it helps you understand if you have SLO, SLA, non-functional requirements in terms of throughput expectation. So this helps you actually integrate with the CloudWatch and set up alarms if in case you're not meeting those. Last but not the least, do you integrate with other CI/CD services? I think I already mentioned that before, but I'm just giving you a run through of dev tools, right? I mean, we touched upon Visual Studio, but you can see we have integration with other IDs. We touched upon .NET, but we have several other SDKs. We touched upon AWS Code Suite services, but we integrate with DevOps, Jenkins, and any other CI/CD. If it has a hook-based architecture, we can integrate with those also. Most of the time, I see CI/CD, AWS Code Pipeline integrating with other set of, like, recently I did integration with GitLab. It's another CI/CD tool, and deployed .NET application via the GitLab CI/CD flow. Right, so those are available. CLI, PowerShell, again, we have .NET core support for PowerShell. CLI, we have .NET extensions for the same. Coreta, Java, guys, this is our kind of OpenJDK version available, again, open for productionization also. Website, web-based application, Amplify, pretty soon you can get going creating your web-based, mobile-based applications. Right, this is some of the other integrations that we have. And before I close here, I wanted to mention the 3 things again. Toolkit, once you have the toolkit, remember, that's the most like go-dos in terms of what you would do if you're going to immerse yourself. The one thing that you want to do is install the AWS toolkit and connect it with your account. Once you do that, you will immediately become empowered to see resources, sample application project templates, and ability to deploy them right from your Visual Studio. From a dev test kind of use case, you will immediately be up and running, and also you will have the SDK to manipulate. Right. The second part is a type of application. I did not show you. There are many types of applications that we support inside, like serverless application. Here is an example of a serverless application. This is a Lambda function, and we have a mocking tool, like right here. Without deploying, you can test that Lambda function. It's a simple hello from meetup. There is not much intelligence here, but we give you ability to develop. We give you ability to manipulate AWS services, and we give you ability to deploy across different set of abstractions, be it EC2, Beanstalk, containers, Lambda, so that your productivity in terms of learning AWS services via the .NET tools and SDKs is not hampered. And we are not done. We are innovating. There is a good amount of innovation happening right inside Visual Studio, and you will soon hear those. Right. Let me just quickly go and yeah. So 2 things you may want to follow .NET on AWS handle on Twitter. We keep publishing newer resources every pretty much like regular frequency, and I am available. I also publish resources on the same. So you connect to us via any of the Twitter handles, and most of the resources that we build, the newer in progress, we keep sharing there. Right, and we have the .NET on AWS homepage. Once it's simple, aws.amazon.com/net. You go there, you see videos, guides, sample applications, which will get you going in minutes. Okay, I'll take a pause now. I know I've been talking a lot, and I should probably shut myself and open up for questions.
And while people think about questions, let's do some let's do some giveaways. So, Amit, do you have any trivia questions? I'm sort of out of my Battlestar questions, and I can just do a random pick. But do you have any trivia questions?
So yeah, so I have 3 AWS credit worth $25. So I have 2 questions, and Brian, I may need help from you on the third one.
Okay, so the way we do this is put your answer in the chat, and Amit, the first person who gets has the right answer, you know, let us know.
Okay,
and then
okay,
so go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I should have probably come back with a Kahoot setup, but let's go with the first one. I have answers in A, B, C, D. So in the chat, you can just type one letter, A, B, C, D. Here is my first question. AWS Toolkit for Visual Studio provides AWS Explorer, AWS Project Starter templates, and server deployment wizards and CFN editor, or all of the above.
We have guesses of D and A and
So who answered D first?
Patrick did.
So Patrick, you are the winner.
Give it to
If
the
you
next
can,
person. I won last week.
Okay, the next, then that's very nice of you, Patrick. The next person is John Doyle.
okay. So congratulations, John. If you can share your email, or Brian, I can share with you the code, and whichever way you want, we can distribute that.
Actually, John, can you? Cause I like to say out of it, John, can you send your email to Amit?
Yeah, no worries. Sure.
Okay, cool. Yay, because that way I don't have to do anything. Okay, another question.
Second is porting assistant for .NET tool is useful for porting assistant for .NET tool is useful for port apps from on-prem to AWS, converts legacy apps to microservices, analysis tool to port .NET framework apps to .NET Core, or none of the above.
Let's see, we got some D's, we've got a C, we've got several C's.
So the first person who answered C is the winner.
That would be Araya.
Congratulations, Araya.
Thank you. I can give that to someone as well.
You can, you're
not-
allowed, you're on. Okay, it's up to you.
Would I be able to use that?
Yes, you can
later?
use it in your AWS console, and so I'll share the instructions also how you can use it.
Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you.
So if you can send your email to Amit, that would be great.
Great.
Yeah,
And-
so let me put my email ID, and this applies to anyone. If you have questions, I usually have a 24 hours ETA, so I'll respond for sure. So that's if you have anything that we can help. We have teams across different US locations, and we can do additional sessions if that's needed.
Okay. And Amit, do you have a third question, or I can just do a random?
I would need your help. I don't have a third question.
Okay. All right. So I will. Hold on just one sec. Okay. Alexa, give me a random number between 1 and 17.
Your random number between 1 and 17 is 3. 17.
Matthew, that's you.
Okay, well, since I've got stuff I'd like to hand it over to.
Okay, so the next
I can't let Patrick be that nice guy and not then just take the gift. It's
okay.
not fair.
Yeah, especially because heroes we get an enormous number of credits. So
Yeah, right.
You know, now that I think about it, I've got a ton too. So.
Okay, am I saying this right? Sergi,
Yeah.
you're the next one. So
Yay.
okay.
Okay.
So
I
if
had
you-
a question. I had a question as well for Amit. So if I can ask right now, that will be great.
Oh yeah,
Sure.
sure, for sure, you're open.
Yeah. So the X-ray service that you talked about, right? Can that be integrated with non-cloud-based applications as well? Like, let's say we have on-prem .NET existing app, web-based app with APIs and whatever, the whole shebang. Can I integrate the X-ray service for
Yes,
that?
Yes, you can integrate with offline also. Again, the data is being published. So
Mhm.
are you okay with that or not? That's the important part, right? So it can work either on it doesn't matter where it's running, be it a EC2 machine or your own machine in your data center.
Okay.
It captures and sends the information that generates the service map.
I see. Okay, cool.
okay. Any other that's our giveaways. Any other questions?
Yes, I have one.
Yes, please. And meanwhile, I'll put on the resources that I showed you on Twitter. Here are the resources for you to learn. The last one is the immersion day, which has sample applications that I showed.
I have another question about the deployment.
Sure.
The architecture rather. So I have a box, like there's a VM that I have used in Azure cloud for ASP.NET application. Pretty much, it's a big application, but it's just a web application, ASP.NET based web application. And it uses SQL Server, Azure SQL Servers, which is again in the cloud. So I was thinking about using app service, but somebody told me that it would cost me probably more because the way it is built is probably, it will probably, the bill will be higher than having a dedicated VM and hosting your ASP.NET application there. What is your experience in the AWS cloud? I mean, I don't have anything very specific about that application that requires VM. It's just a web application that can be an app service. But pricing wise, I just wanted to know.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't want to comment on Azure versus AWS. Here's what I'll say. Where I think we have a little bit of advantage. You probably know Graviton processors, which is ARM-based chips.
Okay.
So you can run .NET Core on Graviton. That gives you 45% savings on a standard instances. So that's one. Many customers are actually doing that and saving. If that application can be ported to .NET Core, then that's one option. Second, I don't know if you have explored Beanstalk. And Beanstalk is kind of, I don't say PaaS, but it's PaaS-like. So when a customer is starting and you don't know EC2, auto-scaling policies, configuring the CloudWatch, so Elastic Beanstalk works like a charm in that use case, right? If it is web application or API, REST-based services, you probably want to start with Elastic Beanstalk. And Beanstalk gives you ability to deploy multiple applications within the same. So you can actually deploy, think of it like an IaaS with different websites and virtual directories. The same model, you have it available in Beanstalk also. I'm not very familiar with app service, so I can't comment on that side. But on our side, I have seen customers actually move to Graviton, especially the .NET Core based, because they're actually saving significantly. And there is, I mean, we have a benchmarking available that has been done by third party, so I can share that information with you if you need.
Yeah, is it like a fixed call, like the billing wise? Is it like a fixed, like a independent of number of calls that are made?
So here's the thing, right? I mean, if that application has a use cases which you may want to look, if it is .NET Core, maybe it can be hosted on Lambda, and you pay only when the Lambda gets request. And Lambda has good amount of free tier numbers. So that's, if you have not explored, then you should explore. I think first million requests are free. I mean, something like that. Don't quote me on it, but there is significant amount of requests that is free on Lambda. If it is a .NET Core based application, cost wise, there is a public pricing. There is pricing that you can get via reserved instances. So depending on the type of instance type, and you get a reserved instances like 1 year, 2 year, 3 year RI, and there are other options in which you can bring the cost down. Do you have a AWS account team that you work with?
Right now, I don't. I have one that I experiment. I use it for experimenting myself, but not actually not for the hosting anything in production. Right?
Okay, yeah. So explore those. I mean, .NET Core, if it is, then you probably will save significant in Lambda. If the application does not get 24/7 requests, then Lambda is definitely a path you want to take that might actually give you for free.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. I'll explore more.
Cool.
Okay, if there are no more questions, I want to say thank you so much. .NET is not an area that we have covered before, but you've definitely tweaked my interest in this. Really, really interesting. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to our community. In 2
Amit,
weeks. In 2 weeks.
I've actually got a question.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, hopefully it's a quick question, but is there any like idea or push towards getting the VS Code like extension or plugin to be, I guess, kind of on the same feature level as the full Visual Studio plugin? Because like I feel like a lot more people are using VS Code these days, whether it's just .NET or any of the other languages that VS Code supports. So like I think it would just be much more awesome to have that on VS Code.
No, that's a very valid feedback, and actually I have been trying to collate that feedback, and this helps me push that PFR. We already have things in motion around the same. There is also a little bit of technical complexity in the actual add-in model for VS Code. We are working through that. You will see some changes, but again, it's a third party which we work with, right? So that's one thing. You would see a little bit of improvement in our like Cloud9, which is another cloud-based IDE, and better integration with our CI/CD services. Those all things are in motion, but feedback very well taken. We have both VS Code as well as there are feedback on the writer. So we are working towards it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much. In 2 weeks, we're going to have a talk on Lakehouse, and we've got a number of meetings set up. We've been meeting every other week, with one exception in December, but we've been meeting every other week since the pandemic started, and so we're on a tear. So if you have ideas for a topic you'd like us to cover, please send us a note. Join our send a note on Meetup or on our Slack group, and thanks everyone, and have a good rest of your night.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, did you note the email, or are everybody sending me the email? I just wanted to make sure I send the credits.
I sent you the email address.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Sorry. Thanks a lot. And thanks. Appreciate everyone. I mean, today was a good weather. I know. I probably thought that we might have very less people. Thanks for joining. Hope it was worth your time. And any further, if we need like an immersion day workshop, take one use case and build, I'll be happy to come and work with you guys.
Excellent. Okay, go community. Yay.
Go
All
community.
right. Take care,
Thanks, guys.
everyone.
Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.